Bishop. Beji chife tai na. Again na really uza na gbera na. Ora na yo dido ni mata o. Ada ba kon me sa so di gene vai ala na da mi ri mi are yi so. Awo ki mi ono da wa sa provide. So me wo fe hon fi itairo o me da ya wan. Mi o wa vai me di me ki itairo. So I give me another. So I'm like, okay, no one's another nine. I'm making that out. I even hear me. Chairman die or the water. I don't know where they don't move. So Chairman will move on it. It matters. I'm okay. Kavi. I'll make the book. I also make resistance. I said, I'm result. But why Kika? Well, why I give a Buddha why you make a request is a directive. So why I am disabled, but many years about the science. So the lecture the little discussion I want to lead is titled Nigeria as a Developing Country, Myth or Reality. My name is Austin Isikhuemen. I'm from Uromi here. There is something else I have thought about, and I've decided it's not just worth talking about, it's also worth doing, to show example. This meeting that we hold here every Sunday, and the lectures that are given, I think during one of those talks, somebody raised the issue of the Asian people not having documented. We have not documented our history properly. We've not documented a lot of things that we do. So, while he was saying it that day, I was in my mind saying, but even this meeting we are holding, we are not documenting. Meaning we are falling into the same trap. So what I have decided to plead with the chairman and the host is that anybody going to give lectures further should endeavor to also put it in writing so that we can be collecting them. And when we have got enough, we can publish it into a small booklet. And that would keep what the ideas we are sharing here, not only to us who attend, but to others yet to come, and even those who don't come. So it is a plea I'm making to the chairman and to the host. And therefore, to show example, I have put my presentation in written form. So I will make this available to the bishop at the end of the lecture. So on the computer now, I will make me know and never get because this has not been made routine. I was made a printer. I wanted permission, then it can be done. Okay. So introduction. What is development? Development is a process that creates growth. It creates progress and positive change, or the addition of economic, environmental, social, and demographic components. And then we also hear the word developing country. This is one with a less developed industrial base. And sometimes they are called low or medium income countries. And therefore these two words are sometimes interchanged. But when we then say developed countries, we are referring to those countries that are regarded as higher income countries, and they are usually highly developed. And then there is also the word that is being used, especially when it comes to African countries, least developed countries. Luckily, Nigeria does not belong to that group, but majority of them are in Africa. And these ones, the clarification is based on the gross domestic product of the countries as decided by the United Nations, IMF, and such other bodies. So, on this ranking, Nigeria is classified as a developing country. So, development connotes progress. And when we hear Nigeria is a developing country, something that should make us proud that we are developing, meaning we are making progress in several aspects of human endeavor. But if you go out on the street and ask Nigerians today, you are likely to get responses that are not uniform. Some would say Nigeria is developing, while others would vehemently object to that claim. What I tend to do in this lecture is to use less of esoteric jargons by looking at Nigerian life and living, using my own experiences that span about 50 years to take a humble view at the question. Nigeria as a developing country, myth or reality? Is Nigeria actually developing? What are the facts that back the assertion that Nigeria is a developing country? The contrary view is the nugatory position that Nigeria is not developing at all. Some even argue that Nigeria is moving backwards. I will start by arguing the case for the former. That is, that Nigeria is indeed developing and has made giant strides since 1960. I will do this from personal experiences. So, let me start from my primary school. What was the age of entry into primary school in my own time? Some were 7, some were 8. And then what was the selection criteria? You were made to put your hand over your head. And if you're able to get to your ear and cover it, you were admitted. And if you didn't, you were rejected and told to wait for the next year. What were the seats we used at LA school? I'm in the piano room. That was the name of the school then, local authority school. We were using trunks of palm trees in my primary one. And we used slates that we went to cut leaves. Bobo, I think that was what it was called, that we used to blacken the slates on which we wrote. And then those days we used to have celebration rites. When either independence or some other events, they will cook rice and I used to carry a big plate thinking that the bigger the plate, the greater the portion. Unfortunately, that was not the case. What was the sort of buildings we had? Some of them actually had mud floors. And if you remember what was called digger or aziga, as we call it in Nishan, many of those floors had those things. And I remember our teacher used to deliberately pick some children whose feet were covered with this digger. And during break time, he would bring a needle and begin to remove them. What was the proportion of children in school? Very few indeed. And there were some that we had to pursue during break time. Who were those who were absent? There were some big boys that were bold enough not to come because their parents can't do them anything. Our teachers will send us to go and pursue them, catch them and bring them to school by force. Let's go to agriculture. Our people produce cotton, and I remember meeting some old women who were using the loom and those who were turning the cotton into threads. Our people had oil palm, yams, cassava, various beans, olene, ihehe, ikpakpa, ahilikili, ihioto. All these were planted by our people. And then we had a lot of economic trees. Most of the trees you find around our houses were of economic value. Orange, pear, cashew, and so on and so forth. But then, it sounds as if it was all rosy. But you will also remember that in those days, we had some issues, especially in this our hometown, Uromi, where there were forced marriages, and there were some wives that were forced to tattoo the name of their husband on their arms and legs. And there was a single individual that had total control of Uromi commerce and transportation. Of course, I will not forget the killing of my own uncle. Many of you might remember his name, Alexander Okpebholo, who was my mother's senior brother. The killing that was organized and executed by some strong men in this town. So it was not all rosy. How was it like with for water resources? We had some rivers and streams, mostly streams in Uromi, and therefore we really didn't have good source of drinking water. And so most of the time, every village or quarter had their own ponds, which we call Omi. And if you remember, the water that went to the Omi passed through excrements, carried along the sacrifices offered at the street junctions. And then anybody who want to do Okpebholo, they will cut akpa and then soak it in the same pond. And when they are soft, they remove the skin, which we use to make Okpebholo.
And we learn to swim in it.
And yet, we will go and swim there and then drink it. Now, it also happened that in that 60s, we eventually got pipe-borne water. And when you were going to farm, you went there with your uko, which your Iboma calls calabash, and then you fetched very clean water and went to the farm with it. Transportation. No, let me first of all talk about security. We only had petty thieves, those that stole either yams from somebody's barn, or they captured a small goat and tied it and pretended it was a baby, and so on. Then violent crimes were hardly known at that time, and then police and constables were well respected. And I remember, even in the 70s, that if drivers are driving to Benin and they use some signs, the other drivers may drop the extra passengers they were carrying because they know the police is on the way. Now, think about the kind of police we have now. Let me leave that to future discussion. And then transportation. It was mainly Bedford and Austin lorries, or what the Yorubas now named Mami wagons, in addition to what we call Cha-Cha bus, which was mainly Volkswagen Combi buses. And some of them, each of them needed to be pushed in order to start. There were narrow roads and bridges, and very few cars owned by the rich. Communications. Of course, we had post office, and letter writing was the vogue. And if you wrote a letter to your uncle in Ibadan, sometimes it would take 2 months for you to get a response. But we also had telegrams and telephones. Some of those old wires are still available today. On health, we had dispensaries. Our people had this jigger I've already referred to, ringworms. And then, of course, vaccination started around that time, because I remember when I was in primary school, they came with something that looked like a gun in order to give you vaccination. Religion. We had few Orthodox churches at that time, and these people played a very big role in education, which enlightened our people. And then there was the other aspect of our religion which we grew up with, which some people then decided to call paganism. Although as education came, we began to call it African traditional religion. But then, at that time, there was less religion and less crime. I don't know what the opposite is. Post-war era, the 1970s to the 80s, that was immediately after the Civil War, and the dollar was less than the naira. We had massive infrastructural development championed by General Conwo. Graduates automatically got employment. And sometimes, as soon as they got employment, they were given a car on car loan. So all you needed to do was to become a graduate. And when we say graduate, we are not talking of university graduates alone. We are talking of people who got NCE. There was growth in educational access in this period of 70s to the 80s, especially when we had the United Party of Nigeria led by Chief Awolowo. And we all know that, we all remember what Ambrose Ali of blessed memory did in Edo State, in Bendel State. There were 6 main universities: Ibadan, Ife, Nsukka, Lagos, ABU, and Unibe. Those were the first 6, although others came on later. This period also marked the neglect of agriculture, because with the petrodollars, there was a time Gowon said Nigeria's problem wasn't money, but how to spend it. And history has it that there was one time he went to the Caribbean and paid the salaries of the civil service, because it was going to generate problem for the leader of that country.
Say that again. Nigeria want to pay their salary.
Yes. Gowon visited them. They were having issue with the civil service because the country couldn't pay salaries. And General Gowon offered to pay all the outstanding and give them some more money for future payments, because we had excess. Devaluation happened. Neglect of agriculture despite Operation Feed the Nation. And then of course there were coups and counter coups. And brain drain followed, because the government of the day started to disrespect academia. And so doctors, lecturers, even nonsense, they decided to leave this country and pursue greener pasture elsewhere. Saudi Arabia became the vogue. And then armed robbery and public executions. We're almost forgetting that now. People were caught robbing, and the army that was in power at that time felt that the best thing was to execute them publicly. Unfortunately, to show you that it did not work, even during the execution, cars were stolen.
Pickpocket.
Then new banks came on during this 70s to 80s window I'm looking at, because that was part of the time of IBB. All the banks that we sing about these days, GTB, Zenith Bank, all those new generation banks were established at this time. Then my recollections of the 90s to date, I decided to group it because we really don't have much time for the lecture. This is the period that was mostly impacted by the military rule, and it marked the second return to civil rule in 1999. There was massive growth in telecoms, because now you are in your toilet and you are speaking to your son who is in Atlanta, or even in the farm. I have seen a palm wine tapper receiving a call above the pantry. Here we were, many of us didn't even know what telephone was. Private radio and TV stations were established. Before then, all we relied on was NTA, Radio Nigeria, and the other ones that were established by states. And of course, you only heard what they wanted you to hear. But when new radio stations were established, were allowed to be established, were licensed, we could then hear alternative view of the people, starting with AIT, and what is it, the name of the radio. So, private universities came on, starting with Radio University at Okada. And these private things I'm mentioning, you can imagine how Nigeria would be and what access we will have to information and education if these private ones did not come up. And what is even forcing the government to try and improve the quality in their own schools now is because of the competition from the private schools. And then massive growth in quality private schools, secondary, primary, and so on. Then devaluation. As we speak today, just as I was coming here, I checked the value of 1 naira to the dollar. 1 naira is actually, as we speak today, officially 0.0024 dollar. In other words, it's about 381 naira to the dollar at official exchange rate. But of course, if you want go and buy now, you are buying at 400 or something, which means even that 0.0024 is not realistic. You won't get it at that rate. Millions of university graduates all over the place without jobs. Unemployment rate at some stage hit 23%. That is of those who are capable of working, who desire to work. For every 100, 23 didn't have a job. And then you now have younger people with degrees and other higher qualifications. I speaking, I know when I graduated, when I got my first degree, but my daughter at 23 has got her master's. And what that shows is that it is not the way that we are now. Things are improving in some respects. And then growth in the entertainment industry. I was playing Sonny Okosun earlier. In his time, there were very few. And they made little money. But if you listen to some of these boys whose jargon you won't even understand. There's a young boy that sang a song called Skelewu. He was asked, what is the meaning of Skelewu? He said even himself doesn't understand. But as we speak, that boy is a multi-millionaire. It's a Yoruba boy. When he has a show at Eco Convention Center, that place takes 5,000 people. That is those sitting. So you can imagine when those times they join them, the least payment is 10,000 per person. And then you have those that take a table for 1 million. And there will be many. So that is a young boy. That boy is not yet 40. So, and then you go to the movie industry. All this in Nollywood. We look at them and laugh on TV, but those guys are millionaires. And then comedy. Those that come to Bishop wants to do a ceremony and he brings Gordons to come and be the MC. To comedian. Just after the event, after laughing, please go to Bishop and ask him, how much did you pay him?
Millions.
You will be shocked that that guy has earned in 2 hours what some of us were earning in 5 months. So, this is an area of growth for our young people. And then, of course, if you go to religion side, there are a lot of churches, growth of churches, many of them genuine, many, I don't know the word to use, but God knows all of them. And then globalization, technology. How can Bishop sit here and be transferring money to somebody in Uromi or Kano? When those days, what you need to do is you send somebody, you enter a car and go to Kano to go and give him the money. Or when the banks improved, you will go to the bank, you queue up and waste your time just to fill one form in order to send 50,000 naira to somebody. But with globalization, as we are sitting here, some people are doing transactions. And we are knowing what is happening as it's happening worldwide. So, I've just tried to trace this trajectory because time is short. Has Nigeria been developing? What are the pros? The first one is education-wise we have. If you look at the number of people who have gone to school, the sheer number, and the fact that we have made education inclusive. Because those days, we only sent men to school because the woman was supposed to go and marry. But now, a lot of our girls, they are holding their own. In a lot of families, the girls are even doing better than the boys educationally. Infrastructure, transportation has improved. Ports, airports, rail. And indeed, in this town where we are speaking today, we can take a train and go to Ajaokuta. We can take a train or go to Warri. Whether we like it or not, it is improvement. Urbanization. We didn't have Abuja until 1990. But by 1976, Murtala Mohammed took a decision to move the capital of Nigeria to the center of the country, especially to an area where the big tribes cannot claim ownership. And then they moved out the original inhabitants, who were actually Gwaris. But if you go to Abuja today, Abuja compares with, and indeed beats some foreign countries on infrastructure, beauty, and the general outlook of the town. Lekki in Lagos. Lekki grew from what they used to call Morocco, which was a slum. Even in Benin City here, Ugbo never existed. But if you go there today, you will see expansion all over the place. In Uromi here, there are areas you go to, and the houses you find, they are better than the houses in which the owners live abroad.
Except that there are no roads.
Yes, sir.
And those are called haphazard development.
That is part of what we are talking about, sir. So, manufacturing, all the cement we were using those days, some were, yeah, granted, some were coming from our local factories, but today, Nigeria is supplying other countries cement, and we are self-sufficient. So no ship bet at Lagos to offload cement for us. And indeed, there are some other manufacturing areas where we are doing very well, breweries and so on. Women education I have already talked about. Growth of SMEs, small-scale enterprises. This has been phenomenal. Eradication of polio, guinea worm. I didn't meet guinea worm, or maybe it was still there when I was born. But I saw pictures of it, where people will use a piece of wood, and then they will fold the worm, and then you carry that piece of wood along with you. As the worm starts to come out, you fold it again, but you make sure you don't cut it, because if it cuts, then the only pain, sir. Then the eggs. No, I read about it and I've seen pictures of it.
I have not seen it.
Yes, sir. And then there were others. There were other things like little children going to school. I saw that one, because you will find patches of ringworm all over the head, and after eating you were told to just don't bother to wash your hand, just rub it on the head, and that it will make those ringworms go. But it worked. No, it's different. Then reduce superstition. We are not as superstitious as we used to be, even though superstition still exists. Because those days somebody bought a car, someone they will say, "Oh, Lazingo." And I will say, why don't all of us Lazingo, so that all of us can buy the same car? I never saw that happen. And then there were several other things. So let me quickly round up. Access to cleaner water. Today we drink better water, but I'm not talking of the availability, because people sweat to buy it. We buy from tankers, everybody has a well, people dig their boreholes. So we have access to cleaner water now, and that is helping our health a lot. Then what are the cons? What are the things that negate the fact that we say we are developing? Insecurity, number one. This Nigeria, lorries used to leave. When I escorted my father to go to Ibadan, I didn't go to Ibadan, to the market where we would take vehicle to Ibadan. It was a Mami wagon he took at Uromi market here. And the lorry finished loading around 7 p.m. and they hit the road through Agbanikaka.
You know what? No.
So they drove through the night. So who is going to take that risk now? And yet we say we are developing. Cronyism, ethnicity, where now you appoint people not on the basis of the qualities they have and their qualifications, but on the fact of where they come from and their relationship with your ethnic group. Is that development? We are importing what we have. How can Nigeria be importing petroleum products? And we are talking of pay subsidy. Religious intolerance, where today in the civil service, in some parts of the country, especially federal level, they look at your name. If you say you are Daudu, they will still say, are you from Auchi? Or they are trying to get through something. So, religious intolerance, high levels of crimes, fraudulent political practices, and violent elections. They did elections those days. There were also some issues those days. But is it as bad as the one we see now, where people carry AK-47 in their boots simply because they are going on a political campaign or going to a voting center? Was it like that? High levels of crime, I've mentioned that. Lack of essential services like water, power, housing. I've already mentioned unemployment. But what of Nigeria's image? When I was in Uniben in the 80s, those big girls that knew some politicians. I'm not talking of Oga. They used to just take their passports and go to the airport.
Yes.
And fly to London on the Friday, and then they returned on the Sunday.
Yes.
They did not require visa.
No.
Because Nigeria was courted by foreign countries, because Naira was strong. Nigerians were the biggest shoppers in London. When they enter a shop, they empty it. But here we are today. For you to get visa, they will ask for your wife's birth certificate, your marriage,
all students waiting
on
summer holidays.
Now our image has diminished worldwide. Merit has been relegated. So your son can score 350 in JAMB, and somebody that scored 120 is admitted, but your son couldn't get a space. And we expect that guy to be very patriotic. Lack of access to justice by the poor. Even at Uromi police station, somebody broke into my house. I had reason to suspect the guard who left without my knowledge, got him arrested, and I know that the law says 48 hours maximum detention, unless you get something from the court that enables you to keep holding. But this guy was there for 4 days. So I was saying, we'll release him. We have not got evidence that he did it. Yes, he is supposed to be in charge of the place. He abandoned the place. He was still receiving salary from me. Yes, that's bad enough. But does that entitle me to hold him? Definitely. I know a professor of law is here. So that's what is happening, even in our justice system, simply because that guy is poor and has nobody to speak for him. And then societal values are in retreat. The things we value that made society what it is, we are no more obeying them, we are no more doing them, and we are no more inculcating them in the young. So our society is almost turning upside down.
Family breakdown.
Sorry. So I would like to conclude now, sir.
10 more minutes.
Thank you very much, sir. So I will dash the chairman some part of that 10 minutes. Nigeria is a developing country. This could be a truism or a fallacy depending on who is assessing. I have presented my condensed views based on my personal experience and my encounter during the years. However, I leave you, my distinguished audience, to be the God. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the time
For opinions.
to ask questions, if any.
Contributions.
Well, when you are making contribution, you are letting the time will take to me. Questions.
Comments.
Mr. Pikaira has a question, and I doubt he has stamina to ask the question he wishes to ask because he has not gone to take food. Anyway, I consider to you may need to ask the question.
Thank you very much, sir. The chairman, sir, distinguished audience, I greet you all. I want to first of all thank you very much for this very wonderful lecture. So I have always said that it's proper to come to a place. I've always said that it is
and
wrong.
stop your bedroom voice.
Okay, for you to come to a place like this, then a lecture is given and you have nothing to take home. But this one now, everyone has something to take home, which is wonderful. Because if I come to a place, a lot of things are said and I have nothing to take home, I feel that I am empty. So I thank you most sincerely for what you have done. But given the scenario and what you have said now, what begins to bother each and every one of us is what is the way forward? What is the way forward? You have got a balance. You've given the demerits, you've given the merits. In your informed view, because I can see that you are well informed in this area, in your informed view, what do you think is the way forward? Thank you very much.
Can I take it?
Yes,
You want to
no way
take
forward.
let me finish.
Let me take one. Okay, I think I just ran it up once.
Okay, you wait. More questions?
Yes, sir.
Take note of the first.
Yes, sir.
Mine is not that question or this is part of the you were telling the way forward. The way forward. Where do we actually left when this was started? How do you get to this place? Is it through the military now or through 1999 civilian government? How do we get to this place? That's one. One thing that really bad I want to mention now is you mentioned about where do we have to move forward. Let me take electricity for this time. Nigeria Power, which is supposed to be essential commodity. Some group of people came and mortgaged the country and sold it to individuals who determine whether we have light or not. Determine if either you have or you not, you pay. And it has been there for a long time. I heard recently that even the state government had this turbine, this private electricity. Those people now sue the state government that they should not. They only have right to supply light to the people. They don't have right. So, a government came and mortgaged the country. If anything is, if we are going to move forward, where is the electricity? Who are in charge? Individuals. And the thing is getting worse by the day. That you don't need to have light, you don't have need to have light until they ask you to have light. And if you don't have, the bill will be either you like it or not, you will pay. We had so all you have said is very good. If you have two things, one, if you have light, have constant light, then that will be better. Right. Whatever dollar go up, dollar go down. That's not the issue. You need to have light. If there's light to get what you want, we get what. If there's light to get what this country wants, you will have more. The economy will boost the economy. So it's pathetic that up to now, there's no hope. There's no hope. There's no future. To getting light. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's the second question.
He has asked actually two.
Okay. When you are the MC, you should shout and raise your hand higher than the stop. Okay, Master David.
I'm not really asking a question. I'm going to help
Good.
the lecturer to ask me this.
Okoje.
Are you jealous because
Okoje. For me, another meeting.
So I just said that whatever I'm going to say will help part of the responsibility of the last speaker or the main speaker about the state of the nation. A combination of things that has brought about the state of near anomy in Nigeria. The general question now after his lecture is, how did we come to this pass that is unsatisfactory? Being the profession of the chroniclers, living through being in service from independence to now, even though I'm not practicing, I have a very clear understanding of the beginning of the deterioration in our expectations and in the services that we receive. I will situate the deterioration in the advent of the military coup of 1966. When the military came, the first part of that interregnum between Gowon and when he was ousted in 1975, they were still innocent and conformed to the way things were being run before they came in. Those who staged the coup were very idealistic, but in the military itself, they were prevented from going through with their revolution. Those who were not prepared, like Uromi, who was a proper colonial servant, soldier, who had no idea who in the head that he would intervene in government, came onto it and he was confused. He tried to navigate his way through, but of course, because of the misinterpretations of the reason why the first coup took place, and then of course again helped by the British, who saw that even if it was the young soldiers who started it, it was a signal of enlightenment among the people, and they didn't want it to go through. And then they sensed the northerners who embraced the coup, because most of the boys, even though they were southerners, grew up in the north. They incited them to revolt against it, and we had a program. Anyway, the military came onto it. Gowon, who came in the day that the coup took place from his overseas course, eventually took over. He was not the dominant tribe. He was a minority. He wasn't in the... this is a short occasion. I cannot give you details, but I lived through it as a journalist. So, now, I was talking of the military now. When it got to Gowon's time, to Babangida's time, he had always been an ambitious military officer. That he spent only 8 years was because he couldn't manage the situation anymore. He would have gone far. That's why we, the journalists, called him Maradona. He was dribbling the country for his own limited agenda.
Okay,
Now,
Andy.
no, wait. I want to tell him.
We had only one lecture.
No, we are giving you most of us didn't know. So,
You listen, let me finish. We will give you another Sunday. The military intervention. The government. Pros and cons.
Not the military pros and cons, because it is their own boys who became the politicians.
I agree. So please,